Today, on our Tech for Business podcast, we're covering challenges in network security, remote access, AI, all the things. And we're talking about practical insights of what works and what doesn't. So to help us with this conversation, we're joined by Kyle, our CEO and president, and a newcomer to the podcast, Brett, VP of Technical Sales at GENIANS. So welcome, Brett. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
So I'm going to start with you, of course. And I thought from your point of view, in your position, what some of those specific challenges you're seeing out there, what are kind of the challenges facing organizations today?
Certainly. And, Kyle and I have sort of been at this for a long time, so we probably have some similar perspectives. I used to work for an organization very similar to CIT, providing consultative services and projects similar to what CIT provides to their customers. So I definitely understand their perspective. And I think we have a lot of commonalities with the types of challenges that our customers see and don't see. One thing I think we probably can both agree on, since we've both been around since early days of trying to protect the network from the inside. So right around the time everyone just bought all their expensive enterprise firewalls, they realized people could walk right in the office door and plug into an unprotected jack in their network or connect to, a wireless network that wasn't secure enough. So protecting networks from the inside, it's one of those things that sort of has never gone away. I would say the only exception for that is maybe some cloud-only organizations that were born during the COVID era. So there's basically no office infrastructure, everyone's remote. But those are some of the use cases that were amongst our top use cases last year for GENIANS. So visibility of who's connecting to your network, being able to establish secure connections for people in the office or out of the office, and being able to report on that for audit purposes. So we have a lot of credit union customers or manufacturing customers that have very specific audit requirements. And those challenges just keep coming back over and over for those organizations, and they need to have some kind of a way to deal with those. And then, of course, everyone, including my own company, I'm sure CIT, is looking at how to utilize AI. So do you need AI? Probably the answer is yes. The question is, how does it fit in your organization? So that's one of the more recent challenges. So a lot of the common challenges we've seen over the years are still there, along with some new ones with more remote access and AI and things like that. So I would say those are the most, common challenges we see, not only in 2025, but we anticipate all of those carrying over to 2026.
Yeah, I think that sums up kind of exactly the situation side of it. Is protecting the inside of the network is super important. And one of the use cases that we've seen him apply to is around these VPN compromises and those other sides of it, where you have a firewall vendor and pick your vendor, they all seem to be in the same boat around this side of it. A 0 day and those things is being heavily exploited. The threat actor gains access to the network. Now what is your protection? So, it's as good as physically being inside the network. So having network access control inside those things to say this is not a trusted device that they're coming from this threat actor, and being able to actively have policies block or get alerts and notifications that something is happening, is just a tremendous security layer against these unknowns. And I think, your network protection just can't stop at the firewall.
Brett, you mentioned something, and I want to go back to it because I find it very interesting about these challenges keep kind of resurfacing, which I think is interesting. There's obviously new issues coming up all the time, but can you talk a little bit more about these challenges that keep coming back? Like, what hasn't changed over time that businesses have to keep addressing these things?
It's a great question. I mean, as I was stating before, Kyle and I have been doing this for a little bit, and, roughly 22 years ago, right around the time network access control as an industry really came to be in all of the large networking vendors started acquiring companies to add that feature to their product set was because of the ability to just, bypass a firewall even physically and walk in the door as an employee. Because as we know, many compromises are, there's lots of talk about bad actors, which is absolutely true. And there's also well-meaning employees and they do something wrong. They've installed something they don't know about, or for whatever reason, right, they present a risk or even an insider threat, or there could be something else going on. The point is they have access that doesn't require you come in through the firewall because they're on the inside. So as long as you have employees, and as long as you have a physical office infrastructure, this is the problem that it's not that it keeps coming back, it's that it's actually just never gone away and the use case has actually never changed. So it still needs to be addressed. And what solution the customer chooses, that's where the expertise, the CIT and their sales and engineers can guide customers in the right direction. So what solution you use is not as important as the fact that you don't ignore that these very basic, issues are still there. On the newer side, you've got the things like potentially more remote employees, and then you've got to deal with the risks that Kyle was talking about with VPN and inbound access. You've got increased cloud adoption. So you've got half your infrastructure used to be in the office and now half of it's in the cloud, but you've got to get access to it somehow. And then of course the challenges related to how you may or may not utilize AI. So, but some of those are still around and they're really not going anywhere. So
the physical environment, if you have an office and you have assets and then information side on it, you need to take the protection's got to be on just the firewall itself. And the challenge to solve for on the side of the network controls is how to make it easier to deploy side of it, which again, the sales pitch for Brad's side on the GENIANS side is that they make it easier to do it. But that's the use case is, Brett's exactly right. It's always been there since we've had networks in, even going back to before the internet side of it, there was still the physical access was the only way to do it. The internet just gave another avenue for the threat actors to get into the side with it. But protecting that inside, you used to have to do it physical doors and the other sides with it. But if you have a network jack and it's live, or you have a compromised device side of it, how do you prevent someone from just plugging in and being able to gain access or attempt to gain access into your systems? And it's the scarier thing in 2026 is just the tools that are available. You don't even have to be a genius hacker to be able to hack a system now. You just need to know how to use AI and some websites. The tools are already there. They literally have storefronts for this stuff. It doesn't take a super hacker genius to do it. So you need to take the necessary precautions, which is why the regulators, like Brett said, in these regulated industries, why they made it a requirement, because it is incredibly important. Typically, our regulated customers are ahead of the curve on these things because the regulators understand the legitimate threats that are out there, but it becomes good practice. Even if you're not regulated, you need to ask, why are they regulating that? It's because it's a legitimate threat. And you should take it seriously as well, even if you're not under some regulatory requirement. If you truly want to protect your data, which everything I read, data is more valuable than oil nowadays, is basically it's the most valuable asset on the planet. So I think it's worthy of protection.
Yeah, there's a couple questions that popped up for me, and maybe Kyle, you can start. Is with this long list of challenges or concerns that we're trying to address, how do you prioritize where to start? And I know that it's going to be different for every business, but just like in general, where do you typically guide people to start?
Usually it depends. We got to understand where they're at first, because again, it's all going to depend on what they currently already have and the risk evaluation of where they're currently sitting. If a customer has no firewall, we're going to say you start with a proper firewall, for example, side of those. And we're going to say you should have endpoint detection response. It should be doing multi-factor. There's just general best practice side within the overall side that you should just be flat out doing side with it. Then we move more into the network access control. Again, is a much more granular part of that zero trust framework side of those things of putting in some defensible layers to allow when necessary, but otherwise not. And that's where then you start to improve upon those overall layers and continue to reduce those risk footprints even further. So as long as they got those general kind of prerequisite saying everybody needs to be here. Then we'd move into network access control side of it. If, for example, though, they're saying we have a large remote workforce side of it, we've been advocating you need to have you should be on a ZTNA style solution for remote access. You should not be using SSL or IPsec VPN in 2026. They're heavily being attacked. It's heavily compromised. It doesn't seem to be patchable from any of the firewall vendors. It's a very attackable surface and becoming almost indefensible side of it. So we need to turn it off. We need to get rid of that door because we can't put a lock on that door evidently anymore. So then we would say this is incredibly important because the likelihood of that being compromised is quite high. So do a ZTNA style solution side of it. And then if you had the VPN, then the network access control may protect you from compromised VPN. There's multiple ways you can spin it.
Brett, when you're in these conversations with business leaders, how are they typically approaching or attempting to solve these issues?
It does really depend on the organization. I would say first and foremost is budget. So you will deal with maybe some larger enterprises, maybe some customers that do have deep pockets and they want the best of breed, right? And then they're willing to pay for it. But you have a full another subset of customers in the SME or SMB market that budget is almost the top line item. So, and it's not by choice necessarily, but it's definitely a constraint that they have to operate within. So I'd say it was one of the first things they're looking at is budget. And then from there is complexity. So in my experience in the last 20 years, almost every potential customer I've seen walk away from doing something like a network access control or a ZTNA solution has been because of either cost or complexity. So those are the two barriers I think that need to be addressed by any vendor who's looking to be successful. You really have to, be able to deal with the customers that have budget constraints, and you have to deal with the same customers that have the budget constraints typically have the extremely limited IT staff, which means the complexity is out the window. So even if you practically give them something for free, if it's going to require a full-time employee to deploy it and it's too complex to maintain over time, that will automatically rule you out. And the one who suffers is the customer, because then they just say, well, we'll kick this project down the road and leave ourselves exposed. So really it's about finding the right solution, ideally something, that's within the budget and if possible can just fit right into the existing environment, because that's the challenge sometimes. A network environment and mixed environment. I had a call yesterday with someone who worked for Department of Education at the state level. They inherited a network. They don't even know what's in their network. So they're still trying to discover the network. There's devices that have no modern capability. They're finding old hubs and closets and things like that. So the complexity, but the ability to try to fit into the existing environment, those are the keys for customers to find the right type of solution. And luckily they have, companies like CIT to help them wade through that.
Yeah, it can be, especially in the SMB market and in some SME, it can be overwhelming for a lot of the ITs to be able to get a handle on this side. Because like Brett said, more often than not, they weren't there during the entire time. Most of these networks have been in operation for 25, 30 or more years, sides of those things. And it's just been built upon and expanded upon in those sides. And I've seen many of these sides where things are, like Brett said, they're above a ceiling and a ceiling tile up. So walking around, you don't even see it. You're just like, wait a minute, somebody plugged this up in a ceiling above the tile. They're under people's desks. People brought things from home. They plugged in access points from home to provide connectivity side to solve their own technical problems. They brought servers in. We've seen rogue FTP servers. We've seen people hosting public illegal content from employee sides on their network sides. Again, if you give a network jack and they get the connectivity, they can get internet. Then if you don't know, you don't have something to watch. A person can't look at a firewall log or look at anything and be able to make heads or tails of that. You just can't. You have to have a purpose-built tool that's designed to look at the network and then build policies about what is allowed devices, what are considered trusted devices, what are not considered trusted devices, and be able to make a controlled decision of what should be on and not on the network. And it's one of the funnest things when you do deploy a network access control solution is just the discovery side of it, just the awareness of going, what's that? Is always an interesting thing. Again, it's usually surprising. Like the count of the devices that shows up is always surprising. That if we got a 100-employee network in our 100 employees in our company, we maybe have 150 devices. You get on there and there's 600 devices on the network. You're like, it can be crazy. There's just not an overall awareness. The way you don't generally just sit and take inventory out all of it, but it's 3 to 1, 4 to 1, 5 to 1, 6 to 1 is where a lot of them land, and they don't even know what's on it. But knowing is everything, and that's kind of what this is about. You can't protect what you don't know about, and you can't protect yourself from what you don't know about. So that there's good reasons to get into these style solutions and consider.
I was gonna say that can't be a good surprise. Okay. If you have 100 employees and 600 pop up, that's not a good day, I don't think.
Well, again, it's more like you don't take inventory or account to say they're not thinking about their phones, they're not thinking about the copiers, they're not thinking about the TVs, they're not thinking about all the cameras, they're not thinking about the employee has an iPhone and an iPad and the desktop and their laptop and they plugged in Alexa in here. These things just sprawl. The Wi-Fi password is shared, so now every employee is connecting anything and everything they bring into the Wi-Fi password. It sprawls very quickly. Apple Watches. Things are almost everything's internet connected nowadays. So it's got smart in front of it somewhere. It's probably get an IP address on there. You just don't take inventory of it because you just think in terms of you see their laptops, you see their PCs, and you see your servers and network equipment stuff, but it's the stuff you don't see that multiplies it quite quickly. And those are the ones you typically don't have your other controls on. Because, like I said, a lot of the corporate business style equipment, your traditional network stuff, the network groups are taking good care of those things. And there's a pretty standard protocol for how to protect those. So those are being done. It's all the other stuff that you don't know about that becomes the bigger list. But again, I'm a visual guy, but when you can see it and you get the list of it, you can get those sides of it, then you can make rational decisions of, we should get unplugged, get through those things, or just create segmentation within it. And then you can just say, look, we just need these are legitimate, they have a need for it, but we shouldn't be necessarily having it coexist with our standard business side with it. But again, having the visual, now you can create those controls.
I mean, that kind of moves me into my next question, Brett, about, this idea of not taking inventory or not knowing what you have. I mean, what other things are people really missing or misunderstanding when they're trying to solve for these challenges?
Well, sometimes we see, not even necessarily with the SMB, or budget constrained organizations, but we do see attempts to use a homegrown solution just to get some kind of visibility out there. The other thing that is very common is just too much product overlap, 4 or 5 products doing the same thing, but none really providing the full picture needed to create some of those best practice policies and, actual cornerstones of zero trust, like Kyle was mentioning with least privilege access. Also, customers, just like Kyle said, it can get overwhelming. So scope creep, some customers may buy way more than they need to just address the issues. So actually being able to just understand, what problem you're trying to solve and try not to get overwhelmed by looking at the list of products. And speaking of being overwhelmed, we'll be going to our RSA conference here in a few weeks, and people, I see very intelligent people. I see CIOs, I see others that just gloss over because there's too many products, too many acronyms, too many products. And then you get into paralysis by analysis because you can't make up your mind what to do. So, those are some of the things that end up being a problem. Then AI is also something that I know CIT is talking a lot about now to try to help organizations get their arms around AI, understanding where it may fit and may not fit. And we have some huge AI initiatives inside of our company as well, inside of our software product, but inside of our daily lives. Perfect example is, there we looked at something very closely with a delivery system and whether we should use AI with that. It just wasn't a good fit. However, we use Slack heavily for internal coordination and even for some of our POCs. And we have a unlimited Slack history. So what the daunting task is trying to find what you're looking for. And the AI mode inside of Slack is simply a lifesaver. You could just type in what you're looking for and you can get a complete full summary with a hyperlink to every thread that talks about it. And it summarizes it in a very intelligent fashion. So there are places that the smaller organizations, especially, I think, are challenged with that. But I think if you can, find the right place where it's a fit, that's great. But I think those are some of the things that are missing or misunderstood, with a lot of our customers.
Yeah, the AI enhances, I could go on for years, but there's also, the security side of it, the shadow AI and the other component sides of it to say, again, Brett, I think I'm paraphrasing, but you mentioned about whether customers use AI or don't use AI side of it. And again, to have AI in there, whether they're organizationally elected that they want to do it or not, because if they're not, probably not guarantee your employees are using it in one shape or form side with it. I think having an idea of what exactly they're using, having a good policy around what to use and supply them with the proper tools is going to give you better governance and better controls rather than not saying you don't have any, because then you're going to invite them to use personal stuff and then put more things at risk by doing so. So there's just good reasons to do it. And again, I think I could go on for hours of all the different use cases sides that we could designed to go around on how to get ROI out of AI. But I think the Slack example is a perfect one side of it. Anywhere you have a tremendous amount of data to go through and large amounts of history on it, AI is a killer tool for any kind of intense data analysis that makes your head hurt. By looking at the data, AI can get you answers in an amazing quick time that makes incredible sense. You're like, wow, that is stuff that I just would have gone down that rabbit hole a year ago with, but now it's a simple ask and there it is. Like it seems small, but it is a big change to go through. I literally had a call this morning, Brett, with a similar use case to that, but they were talking about SharePoint and the amount of data they had in SharePoint that they couldn't find all this history of files going back. And they were trying to go through it. So we were walking them through Microsoft Copilot search that's in there that does a similar thing to what your Slack said in the Microsoft ecosystem side inside of it. And we showed her how to just prompt through it to get it. And she's like, whoa, this is exactly. She goes, we've been back for years trying to figure out how to find this stuff. And she goes, this just did it like that. It was like a 15-minute phone call. We had all his results side with it. So
that's great because SharePoint is notorious for being difficult to find data in SharePoint. So that's a great use case.
It solves exactly that because again, it's data sprawl everywhere, right? People create libraries, they share things, they got stuff everywhere. Nobody knows where it's at. The built-in search never seemed to work. You think would be the exact thing, and you could never get the results you're looking for. But they seemingly have used AI to solve that because it can narrow down and find miraculously what you want and give you a summary on it too. That makes sense of what you're going for. It's a great use case for just a simple thing. Hey, if you don't have to be an AI guru and spend a lot of times learning. Just there's some very simple tools just to make use that'll probably save you a lot of time.
Sure. Well, as we kind of close out, I always like to end with some action steps or some practical advice. So maybe, Brett, you can start us off on things you've seen people do well or places in which you think they should start.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges there is the biggest dangers is that they're becoming overwhelmed. So many solutions, so many acronyms, and the paralysis by analysis. I've just seen it 1,000 times. So just clearly define your problem. What made you start looking for a particular solution or product to begin with? So, and just try to stay focused on that. Focus. And I think if you move away from the product or the solution name or the acronym, and you say, what's my use case? What's my problem? And you let that guide you and stay focused on that, you'll end up with the right solution. Finding that solution is the right fit, that's the best reward. So when you can find something that's may not solve all of your problems, but it solves, let's say you have 5 things you were looking to accomplish and 5 issues you were looking to address, and you address 3 of them, right?
Yep.
Those could be your top 3 issues. That's still a good fit. And on the other hand, avoid the overkill. So you don't need to buy, something that is too extravagant, too complex. That will reduce your likelihood of ever deploying it to begin with. You'll go to redo your maintenance, you realize you've never deployed it because it's too complex. So there is a sweet spot in the middle where you can try to address your most important concerns and then not get something too complex. And then, as Kyle was talking about, adopting AI, where it fits for your organization. I agree. It just can't simply be ignored because it's going to make its way in one way or another, whether it's through your competition or inside your organization by an employee, like Kyle was mentioning. So you have to just go through and look at, what systems you use, what do your people do on a day-to-day basis. And I guarantee you're going to find some good fits for it. And then once you save time doing that, now you've made time to do something else. And sort of that could be sort of a domino effect to see how you can implement AI in your organization. But don't be afraid if there's not a fit in a particular use case to, stick with something that's not broken. But definitely, as Kyle mentioned, it's a huge time saver in multiple different ways. So those are 3 things that I think have led some customers that I've seen to success.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. I think Brett sums it up really well. I mean, I think understanding your outcome you're going for when you get into these situations, stuff on and know exactly what you're solving for and just focus on the outcome you're looking for side of it. Don't get it's easy to overshoot. It's easy to get into very shiny objects, but if you follow like an 80-20 rule, find the 20% that gets you 80% of the results you're looking for. And that's a great place to start. And they're all over the place. Again, trying to solve 100% in one full swoop is probably, you're going to get frustrated. You're probably going to reach a point where things don't get to those things. But I think if you do a true analysis stuff, there's some key things you can do across pretty much whatever you're implementing in the solution stuff that you can do. That'll address a huge amount of your overall challenges by doing fewer, smaller things. And put AI in your environment, find some ROI, and then go buy some network access control. I think that's with the value side of it. I think you can shore up, you can get a win-win out of that. Just get the best results out of it. But
CIT is the company to help you figure that out. So
yeah, we'll gladly help you figure it out. We're willing to dive in and figure it out with them together.
Perfect. Well, that's a great place to wrap up. If you're listening to this right as it comes out, I'll do a little shameless plug that we have TechCon coming up, and you can talk to both of these people live. Otherwise, if you want to get in touch with them, you can reach out to us at info@citsolutions.net. Thank you both for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for listening. If you liked today's episode, share your thoughts with us. Like, subscribe, or reach out at info@citsolutions.net. For more, visit citsolutions.net/podcast. We'll be back next week with an all-new episode.